Hey guys, how's it going? So today I'm going to do a lesson on intermittent fasting, and this was inspired by a client of mine who is currently doing Ramadan, and that's a dry fast. So that goes from sunrise to sunset. So how do you accommodate your training considering there's no water, no food for that entire period? And that was a great question. So you know what? I figured, why not do something that can benefit the entire community? And that's why the lesson on intermittent fasting today. So who am I to go ahead and give you some information on what I've learned? Well, I spent 15 years in the forces, and I deployed to Afghanistan in 2010. And when I got back, I decided to become a personal trainer. Additionally, I have a background in nutrition with a level 1 certification from Precision Nutrition, the benchmark in nutrition coaching on the planet. Additionally, science was always my go-to, so I have a bachelor's in chemistry with a background in biology as well. Was a science teacher, and I'm currently a published author of the book The Nimble Warrior, which is a book based on mobility and flexibility issues that I experienced as a soldier in the Canadian Armed Forces. And basically I outline what I did in order to get myself back to fighting status from a pretty bad back injury. So you should check it out, and the link is there. And additionally, I'm a podcaster. So I started my podcast, and currently I'm at episode 6, and it's the Hard to Kill podcast. And we go over issues that relate to the sheepdog community for training, nutrition, and all things mindset and sheepdog community related. So that's me in a nutshell. And after this lesson, we're going to hopefully have a better understanding of how fasting affects the human body and what considerations to make while training in a fasted state. So essentially, like I said earlier, I am not an expert in intermittent fasting. However, there's not many that are experts in the field of intermittent fasting because it's so new. And my rationale is, if I know 1% more than somebody else, I should be passing that information on so that they can be 1% better than the next person. So the point of this lesson is to pass on what is currently out there with respects to research and share some of my experiences with intermittent fasting. So what is essentially intermittent fasting? Well, intermittent fasting, or IF, is how I'm going to refer to it from now on, is basically something that allows us to eat, not eat, in some way, shape, or form, which realistically is something that pretty much all major religions have always done. So there's no hard and fast rule to determine what is intermittent fasting. Essentially, if you eat and then don't eat, that's a fast. And a typical example of this is when you go to sleep. I mean, the 7 to 11 hours. 11 hours is pushing it. I'm assuming you don't have kids if you're sleeping 11 hours. That's a fast. You're not consuming anything. Hence the reason why we have the term breakfast. So you're breaking that fast. So this is, again, like all major religions, we've seen this. We just finished up Easter, more or less. It's Easter Monday tomorrow. So for the Christian faith, we have Lent, where you're supposed to give something up, and that's a fast. Additionally, in Islam, Ramadan, currently in the middle of that as well. And then for Judaism, you have the Yom Kippur fast as well. Now, there's different ways to model this. So you can do a 16-8 fast. That's one that I do right now. It means that I do 16 hours of no eating and then 8 hours of just eating. And then you can look at the warrior diet. So the warrior diet is a bit more intense, where you do 20 hours of no eating. Now, this is including sleep, don't forget. So this 20-hour block is not that you're up for 20 hours and then you just eat for 4 hours. No, there's sleep included in this. So for the 16 hours as well. So there's sleep included in that. So normally I get about 7 to 8 hours of sleep. So then the other 8 hours or so is me not eating. And then you have eat, stop, eat, which is where you won't eat for, let's say, a day. And then the next day you'll eat a lot. And then the next day you won't eat, and so on and so forth. You can also do alternate day fasting, where one day you may eat only 500 to 600 calories, and then after that you eat quite a bit more. So right now the research isn't really conclusive. Most of the research has been done on animals. So what are some of the effects on the human body? Well, we have a long list of things that have been shown to be affected by intermittent fasting. So all of these have been taken from Precision Nutrition's intermittent fasting ebook. And these are all backed by research, and we've got a list of references at the end if you guys are interested. Essentially, the effects that intermittent fasting have are pretty long, and there's 2 slides of the effects. So what can be reduced are blood lipid levels. So when you're looking at cholesterol levels, these are reduced. Additionally, blood pressure, markers of inflammation, which is really important when it comes to disease. You want to reduce the inflammation as much as possible. Oxidative stress. So when we're talking about free radicals, oxidative stress comes about when you have poor nutrition, poor diet habits, and that can lead to levels of inflammation as well. Oxidative stress can also come from really, really, really long bouts of cardio endurance training. And it seems to be that the research is showing that conducting some intermittent fasting can reduce that oxidative stress. So when we talk about oxidative stress as well, sometimes we can talk about antioxidants. Antioxidants reduce that oxidative stress. So when we consume things like blueberries and things that have a high antioxidant value, that's what we're talking about here. And additionally, it looks like it can reduce the risk of cancer. Now, we can do an entire lesson on every one of these. Again, I'm not an expert on any one of these points. However, this is where the research is pointing. Over on the right-hand side, I've also listed 2 really good podcast episodes, and I have another one on the next slide as well, on the Joe Rogan podcast with Dr. Rhonda Patrick and George St. Pierre. Now, Dr. Rhonda Patrick is obviously a doctor, and because of that, she has really good insights into the whole world of intermittent fasting, and she can really get down to a granular level. George St. Pierre, on the other hand, talks about his ulcerative colitis and how intermittent fasting really helped him, because during his fight with Bisping, he was going through a pretty bad bout of it, and changing his nutrition profile, changed his nutrition habits with Dr. Fung here in Toronto, really sorted himself out, and he goes over it in the podcast, so you guys should check that one out. Other things that can be affected or increased are cellular turnover and repair. This is really important. This is what's called autophagocytosis or autophagy, and this is where all your cells, they have a lifespan, and when they die, they need to get taken up. There's a process for that. There's a metabolic process for that. There's little cells that end up, your white blood cells, that go around and start cleaning things up. Well, you don't want to have all these bits and pieces of cells just lying around. It can lead to free radicals. That's a bad thing. That can affect your DNA. You want to make sure that those get cleared up. So having a fast apparently increases this autophagy. You want this as much as possible. This is really cool stuff. Additionally, fat burning and hormone release later in the fast. That's really important. We're talking about hormone release. We're talking about growth hormone here. So, and fat burning. These are 2 things that, especially as guys, we want to try to up that as much as possible. We always want to kind of look bigger, look stronger. Well, imagine having not only an increase in growth hormone, but an increase in fat metabolism, so decreasing fat levels, so getting that ripped look. It seems to be like that intermittent fasting is able to kind of do those concurrently. And it increases your metabolic rate as you push through the fast, because of epinephrine and norepinephrine release, which is adrenaline. Those are adrenaline hormones. And improved appetite control, blood sugar control, cardiovascular function, effectiveness of chemotherapy, wow, and neurogenesis and neuronal plasticity. Holy moly. So that's a lot of stuff, guys. And again, every one of these an expert can take on and start talking in depth. And a particular expert that I should point out is over on the right. It's Dr. Peter Attia, and he was on the Joe Rogan podcast as well. And man, he can go really, really deep into this topic. He's like super cerebral, and he knows the stuff inside out and backwards. And I really recommend checking that one out as well if you're really interested in intermittent fasting. So that's a lot of information, right? Now, like I said, I'm not the expert on the science. There are a lot of other people out there that know the science inside out and backwards. So take this all with a grain of salt. This is where considering a few different things from my experience and from what I've read and what I've learned so far can go a long way. So it seems to be that the ancient wisdom has a few rules that are already set in place. So if you read the old ancient texts, so I'm talking about the Bible, okay, they talk about fasting. And in those texts, they mention that, fast should not be done by people that are either injured or ill. And that's pretty much across the board, because fasting does incur a stress on the body. And if your body is already trying to fight something, this is not the time to start doing intermittent fasting. Use some common sense. So therefore, you have to be flexible. There's no hard and fast rules. So make sure that if you're going to start this, understand that right off the bat. Secondly, if you haven't mastered the basic principles of my FPT, so my fist, palm, thumb nutrition method, which is getting a grip of your macronutrient levels, then don't even start with intermittent fasting. There's no point right now. It's like deciding I want to do the Ironman before you've even learned how to run at this point. Learn how to run, then learn how to swim, then learn how to bike, and then consider a triathlon, then keep on working towards the Ironman. Okay? Doing intermittent fasting right off the bat is kind of setting yourself up for failure because you don't have the fundamentals down. I won't recommend it to a client right off the bat because I want to make sure they have the fundamentals and nutrition down, and I want them to understand what their body feels like when they're eating at a regular 3 meal a day with full macronutrient profiles nailed down. Next, if you're doing a dry fast, so Ramadan for instance, you have to make sure that you keep your training volume pretty low, because if you can't drink water, you need to ensure that you don't dehydrate too much to the point where you decrease cognitive function, strength, and endurance. If you just dehydrate by 1% of your body mass, so for a guy that's around 200 pounds, right, that's about 2 pounds of body weight, you can't afford to be in that reduced effectiveness zone, because you start going down quite fast. So let's keep that in mind. You can still eat obviously at sundown, so you're going to have to make sure that you get enough water and get enough food into you during that period. But you're definitely going to have to reduce your training volume. And that moves into the next point of basically when you're trying intermittent fasting, you need to be very meticulous as to your note-taking and your feelings of hunger, your sleep patterns, your mood, anything that you can think of that relates to who you are as a human being and how you function day to day needs to really be taken into consideration, because you're going to have some changes. It's going to feel different. You're going to understand your body at another level. How are you going to train during that fast is another question you need to ask yourself. And at this point, essentially, you're doing an experiment where it's an N of 1. N of 1 essentially means that you have one individual doing the experiment. So if you're writing a paper, it wouldn't be admissible. You don't have you don't have a large enough sample size. However, because you're doing it on yourself, you're able to kind of mess with the rules a little bit, because there are no rules really. Find out what works best for you. And if you're going ahead and you're doing it, see what you're able to actually accomplish while you're in a fasted state. Make it fun. Don't just say to yourself, oh, this is going to suck. No, enjoy it. Like, there's all kinds of cool stuff you can do. Like I mentioned, the bunch of different ways that you can set this up, a 16-8, a 24. You can do eat, stop, eat. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can do this. And if you're of the same mindset like me, where you kind of enjoy the whole experimentation process, then fill your boots, and track your metrics. See, are you losing weight? Are you losing body fat? Do you feel, more clarity during the day? Do you feel groggy? What are the things that you're able to do and the things that you're not able to do? So these are the cool things about running a little experiment. And obviously keep it within reason, guys. We're not talking about, going a week without food and water here. We're talking about intermittent fasting. So it's simply a period of time where you're just not eating. So this goes contrary to what we're used to, where little meals consistently all day or 3 big meals every day, because if not, you're going to run out of energy. That's not necessarily the case. Give it a try. Don't be scared. So from personal experience, this is me after a 24-hour fast, so I was a bit fired up. It was interesting. I've done 2 so far, and I tried them for Lent, and they went actually surprisingly well. However, I've been doing intermittent fasting for well over a year now, and I have to say that it's kind of changed my life, in the sense that I'm no longer a slave to my hunger. Now I'm a big guy, right? I'm 6'4". I'm always hover between around 210, 230, and I've always had to eat nonstop. When I was training hard over a year ago, I would get up in the morning, I would have a massive breakfast, well over 1,000 calories, and then by 10 o'clock I would have to have my snack, and then by noon I would have to have my lunch, and then I'd go hit the gym, and then I'd have to have my shake, and then I'd have my supper, and then I'd have my pre-sleep snack. And I was never full. I was always hungry. Now that I'm doing this intermittent fasting, I'm able to go to 11 o'clock, which is my 16-8 window. I eat, but I eat. So I get the same amount of calories in that 8-hour window as I did in the 16-hour window that I used to have before. So I just need to consistently consume food over that period. So my meal that breaks my fast is very large, very, very, very large. So keep that in mind as well. You need to get the same amount of calories in that you were if you weren't fasting. So don't put yourself in a calorie deficit unless that's what you want to do, just because you just didn't count your macros. So hence, back to my last point about making sure you have your macronutrients down with my FPT method, you got to make sure that you understand what these macronutrient values are, because like I said, you're not going to do the Ironman without learning how to run first. I would notice that, and still to this day, around 9 o'clock, I get this slight kind of twinge of panic. It's kind of like my evolutionary biology is saying, wait, Dave, you may not have food after 9 o'clock. If you don't eat now, what if? And I can feel it. It's a slight panic, like, oh, maybe I should just I'm on the road. Maybe I'll get an egg McMuffin. Or maybe I'll just make some eggs. I'll be good. Maybe I'll just make some toast, have a bit of cottage cheese, sort myself out. I'll be fine. Once you get past that 15 minutes, that panic window, as I call it, I'm good. I can get to my 11 o'clock, no problem. When I first started doing intermittent fasting, I lost about 12 pounds. And I started doing a bit longer cardio-based work as well. So that obviously helped because I was training for a run. But my long distance runs got significantly better. And I leaned up a lot faster. So, again, this is anecdotal. And again, this is what we call N of 1. But the research seems to support this type of training, this type of eating that is conducive to improving results through intermittent fasting. And like I said, I've done 2 24-hour fasts. I felt good at the end. So at around 7 p.m., 8 p.m. is when I got to eat. Yeah, I was hungry. And there's psychological hunger and there's physiological hunger. I was both. I was really just like at the point, like around 5 o'clock, I was like, okay, I have 2 more hours to go, and you're just watching the hours go by. It wasn't easy, but doable. And I wasn't at the point where I thought I was going to die. I was drinking water. I even had black coffee, and I felt fine. It was definitely doable. A lot of it was psychological. One thing I have noticed is that when I am intermittent fasting, I cannot do a really hard CrossFit workout past 11 a.m. I don't know if I'm unable to tap into my metabolically into my fat stores, my fat reserves fast enough. I find I bonk and I just crash about halfway through the workout. A bit earlier than 11, so 11 o'clock is my max. If I do a workout at 12, I can't do it. If I do a workout around 11, I'm good to go. So there's obviously a window there that I'm not really sure why it's the case, but it is for me. So it's just something I've noticed. So I make sure that if I have to do a CrossFit workout or I'm doing something that's really high volume, high intensity, I have to make sure I get something into me before that 12-hour mark. So past 16 hours, it doesn't work so well for me. I have definitely not seen any muscle loss since I started. I've definitely maintained and, if anything, put on more muscle mass. I sleep really, really well. That's never been an issue. And so I often get mistaken for much younger than I actually am. Now, is that due to intermittent fasting or not? I don't know, but I like to think at least partially it is. So just to recap, intermittent fasting is simply a method of eating that may more closely mimic our ancestral eating patterns by imposing just longer periods of little or no food. So if we think of Caveman Joe, odds are he didn't have, whole foods next to him. It's not something that he was able to access. So he would go longer periods without eating. Obviously, we evolved to have a capacity to push through more fasted periods of time, or else our species wouldn't be here, right? So just consider that next time you're a bit hungry. Are you psychologically hungry in the sense that you feel a little hunger pang in your stomach? Are you not going to starve to death? So why are you so stressed out? Why do you have to go find that food? It's because you condition yourself to do it. So try it out. Try not eating, right? Give it a shot. If it's not 16 hours, make it a little bit closer. Just push breakfast a little bit further. Preliminary research in lab animals seems to be promising. So like I said, all this research mostly comes from lab animals, but there's a lot more research that's coming down the pipe with humans. So stay tuned. And like we went over, intermittent fasting can improve cholesterol levels, decrease inflammation, and control insulin levels, which for anybody that's diabetic out there, man, that is freaking huge. And lastly, there are no hard and fast rules. So, you follow this solely based on the results you get. So if 16-8 works for you, or 24 works for you, or 1 day of eating, 1 day of really low cal eating works for you, then go ahead, fill your boots, whatever makes you the best you possible, give it a shot. And for me, it's 16-8. And I'm really happy with it because I'm not a slave to my hunger. But for others, it might be something different. So what to do next? If you're keen on trying out intermittent fasting, you can message me and I can send you the Precision Nutrition Experimenting with Intermittent Fasting ebook, which is a great resource. I highly recommend reading it. And make sure you post, if you're going to try it out, your experiment, so your N01 experiment, in the Facebook group. Okay, so love to be able to support you. Love to be able to for you to share in your experiment on yourself with everybody else, just to see where this takes you, and it makes you more likely to carry it on and have even better results. And you can also head to my YouTube channel, subscribe, and share this video with someone you think might love it. All right, guys. So there are your references. Enjoy. And if you have any questions, you know where you can find me. And make sure to like my YouTube page, subscribe, and don't forget to check out the podcast. And guys, this has been great. Have a good evening.